about 11 months ago, my parents were driving from LA back up to the Bay Area where they live, and on the way it started raining, and I guess because of the puddles of oil in the rain, it got kind of skiddy. My dad changed lanes, and he lost control somehow, and to this day he doesn't know how exactly he lost control, but he lost control. So much so that the car skipped out of the highway, tumbled over, and landed on the roof. All the windows shattered. My mom and dad are hanging upside down. And my dad's, you know, he's a funny guy, but not because he tries to be funny, but he just makes funny comments sometimes. And my dad, as he's telling me the story, and I'm like, that sounds pretty intense. I mean, you know, all the windows are shattered, and you're hanging upside down. And he says, well, you know, what the funny thing was, that we're hanging upside down, and my mom asked my dad, you know, are you okay? My dad's like, yeah, I'm fine. Are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. And my dad says, well, the car was still running, so you want to shut the car off. He's like, when you're hanging upside down, it is so hard to turn the car off because you keep going in the other direction. You're not used to it. And, you know, just the way my dad said it was really funny. And I'm like, Dad, all right, you know, and he went on to describe his own experience of what happened when he's upside down. And it was really interesting because so many times in life we try to look at reality upside down. We're so confused by our wants and desires that everything that's supposed to be simple, so easy, becomes incredibly messy and dirty and complicated and unnecessarily so. And so that's sort of been my journey to realize. Yesterday, in fact, was the death anniversary, 60th death anniversary of Gandhi. Passed away January 30th, 1948. And this man, as he's killed, as he's assassinated, he's shot like bullets through him. What does he do? He says, Ram, Ram, Ram. He's blessing the person that he's killing him. I mean, imagine if somebody comes and says, you look ugly, you're really dumb. We get furious, right? We want to respond, we want to attack, we want to say something right away. Here's somebody who's like taking bullets through him, like just completely annihilating. And what is his response? May you be happy. May you be blessed. May there be goodness. He used to say, and I think this sums up my journey as well, he used to say that the whole idea of all this cultivation is quite simple. You want to harmonize your speech, your actions, and your thoughts. That's it. Speech, you can fake it. You're on the mic, you can say nice things. Actions, okay, in most of the context, we can still fake. But thoughts is crucial. And I think a lot of Gandhians have forgotten or have ignored to tap into this element of it, which was the subtlest. Gandhi was really tapped into the thought, aligning the thought with speech and action. Most of us aren't even aware of the thoughts, right? We sit for an hour, or half an hour for meditation, and all these thoughts are going by, and we have absolutely no idea how to control them. We don't know where they're coming from. We don't know where they're going. It's complete chaos. And then if you act from that space of chaos, certainly we're going to create chaos in the world, as we are inevitably doing right now. So Gandhi was really big into aligning these three things. And you look at a man like this, and a lot of people say, well, how do you know Gandhi? Ahimsa, truth, nonviolence, those are the things that he talked about, satyagraha, sarvodaya. You know, these are all these concepts, and we tend to intellectualize them. But you look at one of the biggest things he did, the Dandi March. This revolutionized, I mean, this altered the course of mankind, I would say. This is the Salt March. And you would think it's some grand scheme, let's put a bunch of really smart think tankers around, and let's, figure out how to take these Britishers on. And you would think that's how he came up with it, but that's actually not true. I don't know how many of you guys know this story, but the way it happened, Tagore, Rabindranath Tagore, Nobel laureate, is walking past Gandhi's ashram 2 weeks before the Salt March. This Salt March that changed the course of mankind. 2 weeks before, Tagore is walking past, walks into the Gandhi ashram, and he's like, Bapu, what's the plan? I mean, we got a lot on our hands. What's the plan? And guess what Gandhi responds with? I don't know, but you can be sure that I'm praying. This is a man who changed history, and this is 2 weeks before he does the most incredible thing mankind has seen, perhaps. Certainly, history of nonviolence. This was incredible. And 2 weeks before, he has no idea. And he's saying, I'm praying. What is he doing? He's saying, I want to be in harmony, speech, thought, and action. And prayer was a tool for him. And so this alignment is so crucial. And in my journey, I've seen that there are 3 stages. If I had to break this down for me, why is it so hard to align these? Why is it so hard to be in harmony? And if I had to break it down, I would say 3 things, 3 stages of coming in alignment, of being in harmony. The first one is letting go. I was in India. I want to say like about 8 years ago. I was in South India, and I was walking down. I mean, this happens to me. I was walking down and I run into a monk, and I start talking with this monk, and he's like, okay, you know, what's your journey? I was like, what's your journey? We start talking, and at the end, he says, I'm going to give you a gift. And he gives me a gift of a story that has stayed with me ever since then. He says that I don't know if this was in South India, this was a parable, or if it actually happened or not, but he says there was a small village in South India, and there were a lot of unruly monkeys. And so they wanted to take these monkeys and put them in the zoo. Natural thing to do. So they said, how should we do it? Well, we could trap them, we could set all these, you know, they tried all kinds of different strategies. Everyone said, let's beat them, let's, like, you know, do all this. And everyone says, no, let's see if we can come up with something more innovative, something more compassionate. What can we do? How can we trap these monkeys? And this old man had this idea. He said, let's put jars of nuts. And these jars would be such that they would have nuts, and monkeys love nuts, so they would go after them. But the jars were such that the opening of the jar, you could put your hand in, but as soon as you make a fist, you can't take the fist out. So the monkey goes in all its greed and says, I want the nuts, and goes in, makes a fist. The opening of the jar is such that the hand doesn't come out. And so the monkey traps itself. And so this monk looked at me and said, make sure you don't trap yourself. There's no other trap. You're doing it to yourself. It's your choice. You can get out of it as soon as you want. But you won't if you want more and more and more. So you have to let go. And this letting go is hard business. When you start letting go, I had my own journey like everybody else. You know, I graduated from Berkeley, and in fact, I feel like one of those preachers on Sproul, you know, they go up on Sunday on this box with one of these, and it's like, let me tell you. In my 3rd year, I got an internship, which I hadn't solicited, and I got this job at Sun Microsystems. And, you know, when you're doing your bachelor's degree, I was studying computer science and philosophy, always asking questions of life, so I thought maybe philosophy had some answers. Does not. Let me save you some time. I was studying, and I landed this internship at Sun Microsystems, and so that's like the biggest thing on your mind, you know, when you're going, I don't know about you, but for me it's like, okay, I've made it to the school, now I got to get a good job, that's the thing, you know, or I got to impress the right people so I can get to the, you know, get my grad school recommendations and whatnot. And I got this job unsolicited, so I was like, okay, this is cool, okay, and maybe you've made it now. It was a really good job. I was optimizing compilers. That may not sound like a good job to you, but it sounded like a good job to me. And I enjoyed it. I had a great time, but once I was there, my mind, the greed, I wanted more and more nuts. I said, oh, you got to get a promotion. I got a promotion. You got to get another promotion. Okay. You got to do it faster than everybody else. Okay. You got to make 6-figure salary. Okay. And then it's like, then the .com era hit, and everybody my age was like driving around in BMWs and talking about, you know, millions and millions of dollars, and I was like, man, you need to step it up to the 7-figure range, and that's what it's all about. It's like, well, I don't know. Okay, well, how do you do that? You start your own company. Okay. No, not okay. Maybe. I don't know. I was confused. I became confused. There was this drive. I still am confused. But there's this drive of like more and more and more and more, and that's what we call success. And at some point, probably at all points along the way, I was questioning that process. I was like, well, does it really make you happy to just have more and more? Or is it something that's passed on to you by the dominant paradigm? And I didn't know, but I said, well, how are you going to find out? There's no right or wrong answers. Well, you just got to try it. I've tried a lot of getting. How about letting go? I said, all right, worthy of an experiment. So I started giving. I said, what do I have? At that point, I had a little bit of money. So I said, well, that's the easiest thing. I can give some money. So I started by giving money. With a bunch of us. Everything I would do, I would organize a bunch of people. And I'd be like, okay, well, you give $5, you give whatever everybody can. Let's pull it together and let's give it out to 3 different nonprofits every month. We weren't creative at that time, so we called it the donation club. What else? And so we had this donation club. We were like, okay, let's give money. So we started doing small amounts of charity in that way. And a part of me underneath that said, well, that's great, but maybe you could give a little bit more. I felt like, for me, giving money is a good thing. It's a noble thing. But for me, I came to a point in my sort of evolution, personal evolution, where I felt like I was eating my 5-star meal and then giving away leftovers. So I had enough for my security. I had enough for me. And then it's like, from what's left, it's like, okay, here you go, here you go, here you go. I said, can I give something more than that? So I came up with the conclusion that I could give my time. Okay? And so then, of course, the ambitious guy that I was, it wasn't good enough just to give time. Who wants to go to the Salvation Army and stuff envelopes? You know, you got to step it up. I said, what's the hardest place that nobody wants to go to? I mean, if you're going to volunteer, man, make it something revolutionary. I said, where are you going to go? So I thought, I researched all these places. I must have been 18 at the time, and I found out that there's this institution called a hospice. I didn't know what it was, but essentially, if you're terminally ill, you go to a hospice, and at the hospice, they assign you a doctor, they assign you a caretaker, they assign you a nurse, a spiritual counselor, but they also give you a volunteer, just to keep them company. So these are people who, it's like you have 3 months left to live. What are you going to do? And so my job was to keep them company. It's a hard thing. They have to train you for 6 months because anybody could die on you. And there's all kinds of issues with that. And so you have to be 18, and I was 18. I signed up, and I went for the 6 months. And I actually was with people who were dying. And imagine that, right? When people are thinking about making more money and thinking about 401ks, here I am saying, well, here's this guy on his deathbed. He's 65. His family's in town, but nobody wants to talk to him. He's got a nice car, but he can't drive it. What's the point of all this? And I had experiences with people so afraid of what was coming, although it was just change. Totally opposite of Gandhi, right? Gandhi is like fearless. Forget bodyguards. I mean, so what if 1 billion people are looking up to me, and if maybe 100 or 200,000 don't like me, and one of them's going to come, go ahead. I have no bodyguards. I just walk. I'm me. I'm solo, right? Here's this guy leading this entire country saying I don't need any of the Secret Service around me. And you have these people, on the other hand, who were just so afraid to die, and there was nobody even to take care of them. Nobody even cared, and they were still afraid, and they were still lonely. And there was nobody wishing them harm, but there was nobody wishing them well either. And it was an interesting thing. All these things, it really got to me. I started thinking about all these different issues, and it really transformed me in some subtle ways. So I gave time, and I had some profound experiences. And then after time, I said, well, I want to step it up even more. What can you do? And I decided I want to give myself. And I said, well, I just want to go ahead, use me. I want to say to the world, fine, you're going to take advantage of me? Fine, I'll still serve you. You need me to do this? Fine. Oh, you need me to clean the floors? Fine. I said, is there such a state in your mind? Whether or not somebody asks you to clean the floors or not is irrelevant. But is there a state in your mind when you can be unconditionally of service to the world around you, to the present moment, in whatever way, whatever capacity? And I didn't know, and I said, I'm going to try. And I'm still trying. Along the way, we started this organization called Charity Focus. And Charity Focus, we were in the .com world. And there were a lot of nonprofit organizations at that time who couldn't afford the .com services. And so we went up to a homeless shelter and we said, can we help you with something? There were 4 of us at the time. We were like, can we do something for you? And they said, well, what do you know how to do? I'm like, I don't know. And we started describing and talking, and they said, we ended up building them a website. So we said, oh, that sounds like a cool thing to do. We'll build websites for those who don't know how to build them. This was in '99. And so we started. And we said, well, okay, when you start organizations, usually you have to think of funding plans, and you have to think of how you're going to sustain yourself and all that. We said, but look, it's 4 of us. I mean, this is not really an organization. Just do it, you know? You do this, and we get it done. So we did that. And we came back, we were elated. We're like, you've got to check this out, okay? This really felt nice. It's going to only take up 5 hours of your time, but it's something to do. And you too, you try it, you know? And so all these people started like, okay, let's do it. And then we went from 4 to 20 people. And we said, okay, should we organize? We said, all right, let's come up with a name. So we came up with a name. We got a website, and we did the whole enchilada. And then at some point, there was this question of money. Right? There was this question of, do you charge? Do you not charge? How will you sustain yourself? And we just said, look, we'll just trust. We'll let it evolve. We'll let it go from one thing to another to a third. And it did. Today, there's more than 200,000 members, and we have 3 guiding principles. The first one is we stay volunteer-run, which means that instead of 5 people working 40 hours a week, now we have 40 people contributing 5 hours a week. Same amount of work gets done. We leverage technology to outsource the overhead of administration, and it works. Second rule was we're not going to ask for anything. Because in this world, we have so many agendas. I mean, everything is like, well, why are you here? Because I want something. You're never just there to be here. Even right now, right? Like, I question myself. At one point, I was giving this talk at the World Youth Conference, and there were 3 people in front of me that went. And this was like Kofi Annan was there in the opening, and they were simultaneously translated, and it was my first experience doing that. When you look at the audience, everybody has headphones, and you tune into the channel. I was like, whoa. And I had this, I had this idea of what I was going to say. And I go up, and these 3 people in front of me just plugged their organization. It's like, this is what I do, this is how you can help, this is what, And I felt like it was dry, and it was coming from the space of wanting. And I looked down at my little sheet, and I said, that's kind of what I was going to do. And I said, scrap it. If you want to be the change right now. So right then and there, I scrapped it. I said, I'm just going to wing it. I'm not going to talk anything. I'm not even going to mention the word Charity Focus. And so I went up, and you could look at that and say, what a wasted opportunity. But there were people who came up to me afterwards and like, what exactly are you involved in? It was great. It was this complete demand pull thing. So when you don't ask, when you just serve, over time, the self-organizing nature of the universe is such that you will be served back in return. Maybe not always in the ways you want, but almost always, at least in my experience thus far, in the ways that you need. Sometimes you need suffering. Sometimes your organization needs to die. Because you know what? You're not really all that cool as you thought you were. So it's okay. You die. We finished it. We tried our best. We did a few things, and then we ended it. So what's wrong with that? That's how your life is going to go. So he said, don't ask. Just trust. This is a very radical thing. I mean, you can go. I talked to all these organizational theorists, and they're just, that doesn't. I get it, but I don't get it. It's a standard response. Because they get it in their heart, they don't get it in their head necessarily, because they haven't experimented enough, in my opinion. And the third rule was that we do small things. And so we started this humble organization. We had no agendas for it. It was just give with no strings attached. Even right now when I'm sharing, I don't want any one of you to volunteer. I don't want anything. It doesn't matter. I'm just sharing in the space of sharing. If something comes out of it, wonderful. If nothing does, then wonderful. The joy of it, the reward of it, is this very moment, here and now. I may be talking today, tomorrow I may be listening, but it's the same thing. We're all co-creating the present moment, and that is its own reward. And so that's the thing. So first thing was letting go. So you let go, and you realize the second thing, the second step, which was the power of the ripple effect. The power of you just take care of what you can touch, you take care of what's in front of you, and allow it to self-organize into its own magic. And it always does. I can tell you story after story after story. It is amazing how it works. I'll tell you a story that you may be wowed by. I love this story. It's about my friend Larry. Larry decided at one point in his life, his girlfriend was in India. And his girlfriend says, you know, we've been looking for this spiritual teacher. I found it. He's right here. He's right. You come over. He was in the U.S. She's in India, in the hills of the Himalayas. You come over here. You know, this is the guy. And he's like, are you sure? Yes, this is the guy. So he goes. He goes, and he's like, no, this is not the guy. And she's like, no, this is the guy. And so after some internal struggle, he decides, okay, I'm going to give it a shot. And he stays there for a little bit. And this guy was an MD, PhD. That means, you know, he had a lot on his head. And his teacher thought that he needed to sort of perhaps humble himself a little bit. So he assigned him a simple task. He says, your job at the ashram where you're staying is to pour tea for people that come into the ashram. Now imagine, MD, PhD, he'd actually been in a Hollywood movie too at that time. He was in his late 20s. And his job is to pour tea. It's like, yeah, I'm the tea boy. He did that. It's amazing. He did that for 2 years. That was his job. And he was getting a lot out of it because it wasn't what he was doing, but it was what was happening to him as he was doing it. After 2 years, his teacher says, you, in that corner, come over here. He's like, okay. I want you to go and eradicate smallpox in the world. From tea to smallpox, it's like, so he's totally confused. By now he's getting into tea, you know. And so he says, smallpox, yeah. He says, well, I want you to go to this office and eradicate smallpox in the world. He's like, all right, well, whatever you say, I'll give it a shot. So he puts on, you know, packs up some of his clothes, and he decides to take a 17-hour journey. 3 buses to the head of, like, I think some WHO office. He goes to this office, and the guy's like, why are you here? Nothing happens. He comes back. Goes to his teacher, he's like, well, I tried. I did what you told me to do, but nothing happened. Teacher says, go again. Okay. Goes again, 17 hours again. Comes back, 17 hours. Nothing happened. Goes 3rd time, 4th time, 5th time, 6th time, 7th time. And he's really, like, in his head, he's thinking, oh my God, you know, what, all right, how deep of a faith do I have in this guy? But he had faith. And he decided he's going to go again and again, as many times as he wanted to. 13th time, he goes. Mind you, 17-hour bus ride, one way. He goes to this office, and again, nothing happens. But in the hallway, in the corridor, he meets this gentleman. And this gentleman says, well, you're at this big office. Who deputed you? You have to be deputed by a government, by a country's government. And so this guy says, with really honestly, he's like, well, a Himalayan monk deputed me. Himalayan monks don't depute people to go to WHO. And so he's like, okay, that's really funny, you know. And so they started talking. He ends up being the link that he needed to actually lead a team of 150,000 doctors to eradicate smallpox in the world. So that humanity does not have smallpox today because of this one man in the Himalayas who told this other man to pour tea for 2 years, then told him to take 16 or 13 bus rides, 17 hours one way, to eradicate smallpox in the world. That's incredible if you sit down and think about how the ripple effect works. It was not done by any think tank. It was not done by, no doubt, very smart people. No doubt there was intelligence used in it. But it was not done by some ego-driven design to eradicate something in the world. It was done by the self-organizing nature of the universe. And so you look at example after example. There's so many I could list for you where the power of this ripple effect, something small you do, self-organizes itself in ways that you can't even imagine. And when you start seeing that, to even see that, you have to step out of your ego. But when you start seeing that, life becomes easy, and life becomes fun, and life is just beautiful. It's beautiful. It's like it's a work of art. Everything becomes a work of art, and it's awesome. So that was the power of the ripple effect is the second thing that you learn. I could give you examples from our experience too. I should tell you, in fact. I should tell you about smile cards, because this is my favorite thing to talk about. Every time somebody asks me for a card, I usually give them the smile card. That means I might be out. Okay, here you go. So a few of us decided, we're at this conversation with my cousin who runs this band, and we're talking about pranks. We said, I went to Cal, so if anybody finds out that I was at Stanford, there's going to be a prank on me, I'm sure. So these guys do these incredibly elaborate pranks. You guys do it, we do it, everybody does it. Why? So we're having this coffee table discussion about why do people do pranks? Well, it's fun, it's challenging, it's collaborative, it's creative. You could go down the list. But at the end of the day, it's destructive. Right? I mean, what do you get? Oh yeah, well, okay, there was this ooh and ah, and then it's like dead. You're done. You wasted all this time and effort and energy and resources to do what? Something destructive. So I asked my cousin, can we do something constructive? Same elements, but do something constructive. And he got excited. He was like, oh, you mean like a compassion game? I was like, yeah. And he was like, oh, we can make it totally underground too. I was like, yeah, let's step it up. And he said, well, how are we going to step it up? He says, well, one thing you could do, what's the hardest thing about giving? Well, to get credit. Most people, when they give, you want some credit in return. And I said, let's make it anonymous. All right, okay. And then let's create a game out of it, so make it fun, so it's viral, so it catches on. And so we created these smile cards. So you go and do something kind for somebody, and you leave a card behind. That's it. So you're having a bad day, your friend finds out, and so all of your friends, you tell all of them to like send flowers to her. I just blast her with goodness, like a shot of goodness. My brother, there's a great story. One of my favorite stories is when my brother was going down Highway 80, Bay Bridge, and he's in the fast track lane. He realizes he doesn't have the fast track thing. He's like, oh, I need to go in the cash lane. So he goes in the cash lane, and the guy behind him, it's like, I guess he must have been having a bad day, so he's really furious. It's like, you know, he starts yelling and cussing and flipping him off, and my brother's, you know, he's a very compassionate guy. At the same time, it's like, I'm sorry, you can't explain. It's like, look, I don't have fast track. How are you going to explain that with sign language, you know? So he's like, okay, well, sorry. He just had that in his heart. Comes time to pay the toll. He pays his $3. It was $3 at the time. Now it's $4. And he says, well, here's an extra $3. And tell the guy behind me that I paid his toll and give him a smile card. Think about that. In rage, in anger, in all this distrust, here's a man that comes up. And what is a response to that anger and rage? Compassion, kindness, unconditionally. This is what Gandhi was talking about. He didn't tell people on the Dandi March, go and take wax and just, yeah, let's all look like wimps, you know? Go ahead, get beat up, and then go next, beat up, next. No. He said, look that person in the eye who is causing you harm and know that if you are coming from goodwill and that person is coming from negativity, that your goodwill, your compassion is far stronger than that person's negativity. This is a law of the universe. Gandhi knew it. And that's what Gandhi was saying. And we look at that and say, well, I want to do it, but at the scale that Gandhi did it. You know, I want to do this revolution with those principles. But if you can't do that for the guy at the toll booth, how are you going to do it for the world? And you can't. It's not for your picking to do it for the world or for the toll booth. You have to take whatever moment manifests, you have to take those opportunities. And so this was a really cool way. And you see the ripples of this. What do you think happened to that guy who was really furious and angry? I bet he went into work and it's like, guess what just happened to me? Like, can you believe it? The world is good after all, you know? And that person's going to go home and have dinner with their families and talk about that. But there's something awesome and inspiring and beautiful about that whole process. And to realize that every moment, with or without a smile card, every moment is an opportunity to do exactly the same thing. And that's a beautiful thing. So that's the second thing, the ripple effect. You really start doing that. Once you let go, you're like, wow, ooh, it's really not my show. And that's a good thing. It's like, oh, first thing, no, ego's not here. Then it's like, wow, without the ego, the whole thing works too. It's beautiful. And then the third step, and the final step, is you realize the power of small. You realize the power of each act. You may have thought that, well, for this act to be meaningful, it has to have this or that reward. There has to be a story that I can share on the mic next time I'm there. Otherwise, the act was not a good act. That's not true. So the more you start doing it, you realize that actually small is truly beautiful. That you can do tiny things. And the reward for it is not what you get in return. Reward for it is not what happens because of that act. The reward is the act itself, in that very moment. When my brother says, I'm going to rebound that with compassion, he was rewarded. The other person was rewarded. That's it. That's good enough. There's no metrics needed for that. That's an experiential thing. And that can happen in every moment. So you start realizing that more and more and more. One of my friends wanted to help the world. Very compassionate woman. And she says, I want to change the world. But she wanted to do it at a big scale. And she was an airline hostess. They're like, well, what can I do? I don't know. Well, so she came up with some ideas. She's like, I know what I'm going to do. I have this brilliant idea. She wrote up a great business plan, and she decided to go to the CEO of American Airlines. And she got in somehow, and she presented this, and nothing happened. And she tried different avenues. She tried different tactics. Nothing worked. Then at one point, somebody comes up to her and says, Nancy, her name was Nancy, you've tried all these things. Why don't you try doing small things? Instead of trying to change the world, just do something small. Do something that you're moved to do. And she was very moved to help children. And so the suggestion was, go in your closet, take something you have that you don't necessarily need, and go offer it to somebody. And she started doing that. And then at one point, she was on a flight. She's an airline hostess, right? Flight attendant. Is that the PC way to say it? She's a flight attendant, so she's on this plane, and they've got a layover, so she's staying at a hotel. And she's, again, that thought comes up. Okay, what's a small thing I could do? And she says, well, I don't know. I think I love children, and there's an orphanage here. Maybe I could just take something. What do I have? What's around here? And she says, okay, you know how hotel rooms give you all this, like, 3 soaps and, like, 2 shampoos and, like, you know, you're never going to need it. And so she says, oh, I got all this extra stuff. Let me just package it up nicely and take it to an orphanage. And so she did that. And the kids were totally touched. It didn't matter what was in that little goodie bag. It was the heart with which she was giving. And that totally touched her. So again, she comes back and she tells all her other flight attendant buddies, hey, you guys should try this. And this time, they stopped by the front lobby. And they said, hey, we're actually taking all your extra soaps and we're passing it around to an orphanage in your local community. And the guy behind the counter is like, oh, really? Well, those actually don't cost us anything. Here, let's take 10 more. It was beautiful. She had no idea of how it was going to scale. She had no idea of what it was going to do. Today, there's 4,000 flight attendants. This woman, was World Woman of Peace in 1999, and they do amazing work, all of these millions of dollars worth of stuff. And now it's not just like toiletries. Now it's gone into like volleyballs, you know. Companies say, oh, I got extra volleyballs. If you're going to go to Guatemala, here, take a bunch. And the kids can have volleyball. And the whole project is a beautiful project in that sense. And it started because of something small. She didn't want to scale it. She wasn't thinking, how am I going to change the world? She was thinking that. But over time, she realized actually the power of it is in the here and now. And let me do that here and now. Let me transform myself. through that process. So that was great. Story from my experience. I mean, there are many. This is my favorite, small things. I do small things all the time. I don't do anything. It's like people are confused when they have to introduce me, and it's like, you know, what do you do exactly again, Nipun? You know, it's just small things. That's really what I do. And whatever comes up. I mean, I have no grand names, no grand degrees, no grand awards, nothing. And so, we keep doing small things. What are some manifestations of those small things? Karma Kitchen, you brought up Karma Kitchen. Last March, a bunch of us had a meeting, and at the end of the meeting, they were like, yeah, we should actually, you know, this idea of not giving and not expecting anything in return, that's really powerful. I mean, we've done it with services, we've done it with these smile cards, we've done all kinds of things. How can we take it to another level? And so one of the ideas that came up was, let's run a restaurant on this gift economy way. So you go to this restaurant and it says your bill is 0-0. Your meal was paid for by somebody before you, and you get to pay forward for somebody after you. And no, don't feel guilty. You can put whatever you want in an envelope, and you can put that envelope in that box right before you go out. Nobody will know. We'll never be able to correlate who gave how much. And you look at that, especially if you go to business school, you look at that and you're like, ha ha, not going to work. This is not sustainable. But guess what? We actually made a whole lot more money than our costs were. People gave. People are generous if you give them an opportunity to be generous. That doesn't mean everyone's going to, you know, oh, here's $1 million, this is so great. You know, that's what, there are people who will come and maybe they'll give $1. There are people who gave their BART passes. There was a woman who came in and she says, well, I don't know what to give. We said, well, you should offer whatever you're moved to offer. She says, well, I have no money. I'm not that well off. We said, well, money's not the only currency. You can give in goodwill. It's like, how can I give in goodwill? Well, so this volunteer said, well, you could actually go and hug somebody that might want a hug. So this girl gets up and goes to another table. He says, I'm just giving a free hug. Can I give you a free hug? Who's going to say no to that? And can you imagine the transformation of somebody watching this? Can you imagine the transformation of that woman? Instead of saying, oh, I don't have money, oh, I'm lower in the totem pole because, you know, only people with money are supposed to be high up. It's like, all of a sudden now it's like, oh, I can give of myself. How liberating. How amazing. Another time, I mean, there's so many Karma Kitchen stories, it's amazing. Another time, this guy comes up and it's like, okay, this is all about trust, right? You guys trust me to pay whatever I want, right? We're like, yeah. And so he says, all right, well, I'm going to throw that trust back in your face. Here's $100. You bring me back whatever change you want to give me. And you know, this is all volunteer run. This is only on Saturday nights. We take over this space, and it's all volunteer run. So it's not like you have professional people going up and figuring this out. And so here's this person, in fact, who's doing his PhD at Cal, and he is like, okay, what am I going to do? Right? What do I give him? Like, do I give him, you know, 30 or 20, or do I give him all 100 back? Or what? And then he has an idea. He goes back. He gives him 120. Blow him away. And this guy, can you imagine? It's like, yeah, give me what you want. And it's like, yeah, take that, buddy. Here's 120. And this guy, and it sounds funny when we listen to it, but that experience of that person, he was just completely in awe, completely stunned. He's just watching. He's like, I can't believe I'm experiencing this, you know? And these are true stories, one after another after a third. It's like you give people an opportunity. When you are in that space in you, you allow, implicitly, you allow other people to be in that space in themselves. And that's when the power of small really takes off. That's what allows things to scale. And it may not scale through you, but it will scale in the world. And it's a good thing. So if it's a good thing, why are you worried about getting credit? Just go ahead. You might be the next Gandhi. Perfect. If I can play a role, if I can do something for you and that furthers your journey, that's beautiful. And that's it. That's the end of it. So this power of small, you know, those are the three key things. You let go, you see that everything forms into this beautiful ripple effect. It's not your show, but it's still a beautiful show. And the third thing is you realize that this opportunity to participate in this beauty is in every moment, in every small act. And here's the punchline. It is not what happens because of it. The service is not what you do for the world. You don't do it to help other people. You do it because there's actually a transformation that happens within you in that very moment. And in fact, you talk to people who serve a lot, you will find them saying one thing all the time. Thank you for the opportunity to be of service. They will be glad that they got a chance to be used for your benefit. Because those people understand that it actually benefits themselves in such deep, incredible ways. So I'll end with one last story. Before coming here, we were with a dear friend of mine, Professor Sharik. He runs the Kosmetsky Global Collaboratory. Great guy. At one point, I asked him, so Sharik, can you tell me one of the most influential moments of your life? And, here's a guy, I don't know if you know about his background, but he's done that and then some. Like, he's done a whole lot in the world. He's accomplished everything that you may want to accomplish at some level. And he says, well, Nipun, one time, I had all these things going on in my life, and I believe he was at Stanford, and he decides to go take a walk. And it's a long walk, and he's going down. And he sees a Nigerian man outside selling drums. And this guy, it just felt like he was on a high. He's drumming away. He's like, brother man, how are you? And Sharik is like, okay, I got all these things going on. I'm not even going to pay attention to him. But this guy's just so happy and radiating some deep goodness. So he doesn't know. He's like, all right, when something catches his attention, he wants to ignore him, but he doesn't, and he's looking. He's like, I need to talk to this guy. He's too happy. So he goes up and he says, I don't think he says brother man, but he says, hey, buddy, why are you so happy? He just straight, forget beating around the bush. I don't want to buy your drum. Just tell me the punchline. Why are you so happy? And that drummer, the Nigerian drummer, says, in this moment, I realize that all my forefathers and their forefathers, if any one of them had taken one left turn instead of a right turn, had fallen off some cliff, had slipped somewhere, had gotten hurt, had made another decision, I would not be in this very moment. For this very moment to arise, there are so many complex conditions that have to happen. This is true of every moment. And this guy's like, that's why I'm so happy. Because it takes all of eternity to create here and now. And that's amazing. And that's why, brother man, I'm happy. And Sharik cracked a smile. And it's like, that's a deep lesson. And so I would just leave you with that. Every moment is an opportunity to deepen your understanding of who you are, express yourself in service of other people, and be cognizant of this wonderful beauty that we are in. Thank you.